Hey everyone, it's Marc Sabatella from Mastering MuseScore, and welcome to the MuseScore Café. This is my weekly series. We talk about some aspect of creating music using MuseScore, how to use the tool, all the different things that are involved with creating music in this kind of notation software. So we usually have a theme we talk about, and today's theme is going to be choral music. So that's kind of what I'm going to be focused on here. And y'all can let me know if I'm coming through okay, and if you all can see and hear me. Should be the case, though. And a couple little, I'll get to this order of business a little bit later. A couple little orders of business to talk about first here. Several, in fact. One of them is, if you haven't already, I'm going to put in the link to the poll that I created to so that you all can help me improve this community as it says. So if you haven't already completed this poll here, and you have any interest at all in this community, which I hope you do, then I would love it if you'd complete the poll, and then if you have any additional comments, go ahead. And thanks for the confirmation on hearing me, and it is very windy here too. Rode my bike in this morning, and I actually had kind of mostly a tailwind, but going home's not going to be fun. But luckily it's not very far either. So I mentioned a few orders of business. So one of them was just to tell you about the poll thing. Another one is we're gonna kind of be swinging back to here, but if you're on the beta channel for MuseHub, in other words, there's the regular MuseHub that lets you download MuseScore and MuseSounds, and on Linux it's called MuseSounds Manager now, the program that lets you download MuseSounds. If you're using the beta version, there was just an update like yesterday, day before, to all the sounds that has finally done something that people have been requesting for a long time and is going to be relevant to us today, and that is increasing the ranges of the instruments. As I was starting to say that, I remembered something else that I needed to make sure I told you about, but whatever, it'll come back to me. So ranges of instruments are now going to be expanded. So if you don't have the beta version of MuseHub, it'll probably be still, whatever days or whatever before you get this. But let's pay attention to this. Oh, I remember the other thing. The other thing is this. When I asked about, can you hear me okay? Remember how those of you who follow these streams, in some of the recent sessions, the Music Masterclass sessions in particular, the sound has been wishy-washy and kind of in and out. I can't say that I exactly understand why, but I think I found a solution. And so if you ever hear that happening again, where the music, when I play back, is just really weird, it's never ideal coming through streaming, but sometimes it's worse than others. And I think it's basically working backwards. I have a switch that's supposed to disable echo that I'm supposed to turn on No, I'm supposed to leave it off to disable echo, but if I turn it on, it's actually improving the sound. So it's backwards. So if we ever get to this conversation again where you're like, the music is cutting in and out, remind me to try that if I forget. All right, so let's talk about this range thing, because as I mentioned, it's going to become a thing. So let's listen to the beginning of this is the first time you've ever heard the MuseScore Café theme with MuseSounds. I've never been able to use MuseSounds because this initial line, actually, well, yeah, that's the right key. That high D-flat concert, which is E-flat written, that didn't used to be present in MuseSounds because it just stopped. It said, well, the orchestration textbook says don't go above C concert, and so it didn't record any notes higher than that. And people were saying, no, that's not high enough, because at least in jazz we regularly use higher notes than that. And the same was true for a lot of other instruments. The ranges were, they recorded professional musicians playing these things and stopped where they stopped. Well, so the current update now expands that for like almost all instruments, and in some cases to crazy extremes, like the trombone can get, well, let's listen to this because it's really silly. So let me get the sound back up here. Okay, so that's a low C. That right there is a pedal tone, so that already is hard to produce. That right there, low B, is technically the lowest note you can create as a pedal tone on a trombone. Wait a minute, is that the right one? No, I'm off by, I forget. Anyhow, let's go down. Let's keep going down. So, right there. So this is a crazy low note. No trombone player can actually play that note. It would require well, bass trombone can, but bass trombones can play that. So anyhow, the, uh, the ranges have been extended in Muse Sounds so you can hear that. And so this is the first time that we've ever used Muse Sounds for the MuseScore Cafe because of that opening line. So let's listen to that opening line right now. Yeah. So that high D flat concert, high E flat, that's finally a thing now, and then that fall is nice and realistic too. Yeah, I went ahead and modified everything, and of course with Muse Guitar now we can have the Muse guitars, although it's mostly just doing this muted sound. So that's not particularly impressive. But anyhow, I'm using the Muse Sounds guitar as well as the Muse Sound electric bass. So anyhow, this is the first time I've ever played the MuseScore Cafe using Muse Sounds here because it's never been up to the task before, but finally is. Okay. This, as I mentioned, is relevant because we're going to find out what the choir ranges are and how that works. So Stephen Bryant is asking about choosing instrument range. So you certainly can't change Muse Sounds. You can't change what notes were sampled, but as far as what we see here, like if I zoom in here, you'll see that MuseScore is telling us that these notes are probably perhaps too high to play, right? It's not saying that they are unplayable. It's saying, hey, these are notes amateurs probably can't play. And that's true. This high B flat concert is high C. That D flat concert is high E flat. That's definitely something a lot of amateur musicians can't play. So MuseScore colors them this kind of dingy yellow, right? So MuseScore decide, and then if you get too high entirely, like if I try to take that note up another octave, MuseScore's not going to be able to play it. And it also required it to move to the next page. And now it colors it red, right? So if it thinks, no, that thing is just totally not playable, it's going to color it red. So then the question, I think, is, well, can you control what those ranges are? And yes, you can. If I right-click the trumpet staff, go to staff part properties, you'll see here is where it is saying what the amateur range is and what the professional range is. So anything outside the amateur range will be colored yellow. Anything outside the professional range will be colored red. So you can edit those pitches. And these are concert pitches. So you can edit those pitches so that those warnings display differently, because they are kind of useful to keep in mind when you're getting too high or too low, especially when writing for something you don't know about. And you can also, if you really just don't ever want to see them, go to Edit, Preferences, Note Input. Yes, color notes outside of usable pitch range. This option here, if I turn it off, then it won't anymore. It won't do that thing anymore where it colors the notes. So I mentioned the fact that this is going to affect our choral writing, and that's what we're going to be focusing on today. So what I would love it is if anyone who happens to have MuseScore fired up and can check this for me, who doesn't already have this beta update installed, can check the ranges to see what MuseScore, what Muse Sounds, not by color, but by actually putting in the note, what is the highest note an alto voice can sing in Muse Sounds? That's what I'm curious. And Steiner is pointing out that the range that C sharp 6 is the upper end of the professional range. I would say that is accurate for orchestral writing, right? It's not what you're capable of playing, it's what is reasonable to write. And if you are writing for an orchestra, you really shouldn't be writing higher than that. I'm not saying it's not playable by anyone, but in a classical context, that is not considered like kosher to go beyond that. And that's why all orchestration textbooks stop around there. But in a jazz context or a funk context or whatever, salsa, yes, regularly trumpet players go higher. That is certainly true. And that's why we can edit these ranges. So they're there to kind of give you a clue of when you're kind of getting out of hand. So I'm going to load up another score here and show you what I mean about the choral ranges because, this was sort of an unexpected thing that showed up yesterday or might have been Monday night. And I figured maybe you'd want to hear this. So the new ranges are now for choir is such that altos, if you're doing closed score, soprano and alto on one staff, tenor and bass on the bottom, you can pretty well get away with altos for the top staff, basses for the low staff, and get all the notes. So clarinet now goes from low E flat, which of course isn't really a note on the clarinet, at least not on a B flat clarinet, but on an A clarinet, it's a half step lower. So that is there for that. And this note here, that note is a full octave higher than anyone in their right mind would normally ever write. But there it is, right? So, and here's the high G for trumpet. Right, that's a good solid lead trumpet high G. Here now are the vocal ranges as Muse Sounds has them. So this soprano can now go down to a low F. However, if you write that low F for soprano, it's going to sound pretty weak, right? At least it does, right? It's So the fact that it's notated in red, that just means it's beyond what they think you should write, and you're welcome to edit those ranges, as I said. But so that is part of the point here, that the ranges are now beyond what's reasonable to actually write. You would never write a low F for soprano. That is not reasonable. But Muse Sounds can now do it. This high F, that's the Queen of the Night. Right, that's the Queen of the Night, high F. Here is the alto range. It goes from a low D to an A above the staff. Well, if you're going to write a closed score choral piece, soprano and alto on one staff, you're probably not going to write any higher than A. You might write lower than F for the altos, right? You might give that alto an E, but you're probably not going to write the soprano any higher than A. So if you're going to write closed score choral music, I would recommend setting your voice to the alto sound, and you can probably get away with it. If you really need your soprano to go higher than that A, then you're out of luck. You'll have to flip over to MS Basic or some other sound font or something. But this range is also reasonably well balanced, whereas for the soprano, that low F is kind of useless because it's so quiet. It's trying to sample an actual soprano trying to sing that low F, and so it's not as loud as the alto singing that low F. So I would recommend using alto. Now for the bottom staff in a closed score thing, bass. Yeah, right. I have heard a couple recordings of people who have crazy low ranges like that, but this G is also like a full octave lower than one normally writes for bass in a choral context. Maybe it'd go down to about an E below the staff, but this is crazy low. The high note for bass is this G sharp above the staff. And again, you probably aren't going to write any higher than that for tenor in a choral context. So in an SATB arrangement, I'm going to recommend using bass sound for your bottom staff. That's my recommendation. The bass sound will give you a pretty good range for choral music for men. It's, real tenors are going to go higher than that, but you're probably not going to write higher than that G sharp in a choral arrangement for the most part. If you need to, then switch to MS Basic or write open score format so you can use the individual sounds, because tenors can go crazy high. This is the tenor's lowest note, which is F. You know, this is bass clef F right below the staff. Listen to this high note. Yeah, I don't even know what that is. That's like crazy high stuff. I don't know. I have a feeling that these notes aren't even really sampled, that that note was sampled at a lower pitch and then pitch shifted just to make those notes available. So anyhow, that was, again, a bit of a diversion, but I think a useful one because it allows us to talk some about ranges, which is one of the things you want to know talking about choral music. So I'm going to give you a quick survey of some of the pieces that I have loaded up here that we can talk about because, you know, these are my pieces and I know them and that's why we're looking at them. But then if there's particular things that you all want me to take a look at, let me know, and I will do so. So this is the piece that I use as my demo piece for choral music all the time in my MuseScore demos, right? It's a piece that is designed to be a demo. Whoops, let me see if I can get this window sized the way I want it. There we go. It's designed so that you get to see closed score format, and you get to see a chorale style where everyone basically has the same rhythm, and you get to see something that's more contrapuntal where everyone has different rhythms, and we get to like see how we deal with the lyrics for that, right? So we'll look at little bits of this score. Then we'll also look at this other piece that I've used as a demo for other purposes, and this is another closed score format piece. And I don't know that there's really anything in particular in this that we need to be looking at, but if it comes up, I will refer to it. But then I want to show you at least one open score format piece, and that is going to be a piece that I use as a demonstration in my counterpoint course, so you'll be hearing this piece more in my demonstrations if you take the counterpoint course. This is open score format. You'll see soprano, alto, tenor, bass, each on separate staves. And it was designed to be somewhat Renaissance in style, at least to use the concepts. I'm trying to get my things all sized the way I want. Sorry about that. There we go. So this piece uses a lot of Renaissance conventions, including the counterpoint, including the use of the 4/2 time signature. Not that it would have been notated that way in the Renaissance. There's all these other time signature symbols that get used, but in modern parlance, we would just call it 4/2. And then these guys here, these are showing the range, right? This is showing that the soprano needs to be able to sing from a D to a high A, and that the alto needs to sing from that C to that D, etc. So I'll show you how to enter all these things. All right? So I've given you a little bit of a tour of some of the things that we're going to be looking at, and we can also then talk about, with respect to Renaissance music, what if we want to not show bar lines and some of the other things if people are interested. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new score, and we're going to talk about the whole open score versus closed score format, and I'm going to go ahead and create a closed score format one. So I'm going to use create from template, and under choral here, I'm going to choose the SATB closed score, or maybe one of these other ones that includes closed score like plus organ or plus piano. I'm going to pick this one here, SATB closed score plus piano. You'll see that it gives you 2 staves for the voices and 2 staves for the piano, all bracketed as appropriate. If you pick the plain SATB template, it gives you 4 separate staves. I figure by working on closed score, you learn everything you need about doing the open score also, so it doesn't, we're not missing anything by doing this. So I'm going to pick the closed score plus piano, and yeah, I'm just going to go ahead and accept all those defaults because it doesn't matter. Let me also shrink down this. There we go. All right. So we have our closed score thing here, and as I mentioned, I want to actually use Muse Sounds for this because they do sound pretty good, and now that the ranges are extended, it's a little more viable. So I'm going to show you how to set up with Muse Sounds, because if you use the closed score format, the template in MuseScore, if I open the mixer here, you'll see the mixer is still using MS Basic. So I want to switch to Muse Sounds. So I'm going to go to the mixer and pick Muse Sounds, Muse Choir, altos. I'm going to use the alto sound for the top staff for the reasons I described. It really captures the range reasonably well for both soprano and alto in choral music. And then for the tenor and bass, I'm going to go to Muse Sounds and pick basses. You don't have to do that. If you're happy using MS Basic, then by all means do so. Now, the one other thing that I'm going to observe, and anyone who's tried using Muse Sounds voices is aware of this, they're super quiet. I don't know why the Muse Sounds voices are as quiet as they are, but it's the way it is, and people have been commenting on it, and the developers know that people think it's too quiet, but they haven't changed it, and it's still not changed, so I'm guessing they have their reasons. But what I'm going to just do is just crank them. Just pump them back up, just pump them both up to 12. So 12 because Spinal Tap amps go to 11, but MuseScore Mixer goes to 12. So I can now start writing my music. I've set up my score the way I want, and if I write a note, I'm now hearing the Muse Sounds altos sound here. So let me go ahead and close the mixer because I don't need it anymore. And now let's talk about actually the nuts and bolts of entering our music. And if, I know a lot of you are working on SATB arrangements right now as part of, what we're doing in the projects that we're working on, the SATB project right now. So if you have particular questions, particular things that have come up that you're wondering about how to do in MuseScore, feel free to ask. But I have a list of things that I want to make sure I talk about. So the first thing is, we're going to enter our two voices one at a time. I'm going to enter my soprano voice first, then my alto voice. It doesn't actually matter what order you do them in, but you're going to do them kind of one at a time rather than one note, one note, one note, one note. You could do it that way if you want, but it's a lot more work. So I'm not saying I have to enter the whole piece that way, but I'll enter like one phrase or so. So if I'm going to write my little Mary Had a Little Lamb arrangement that I'm often thinking I want to do, first thing I have to do is think about, well, gee, key-wise, this is probably, if Mary Had a Little Lamb, ED is like EDC, and if I put it down at the bottom of the staff for the soprano, that's too low. If I put it up here, that's pretty high because it's going to go to a high G. So C is a terrible key for a choral arrangement of Mary Had a Little Lamb. Y'all catch that? I mean, that was some stuff I just said right there, right? So what I'm saying here is, let's take a look at the piano keyboard, that if this is middle C here, Mary Had a Little Lamb is this EDC here if I do it down towards middle C, but that's asking the sopranos to whisper. It's not, you could do it, but it kind of pushes your whole arrangement low. On the other hand, if you write it up here, now the sopranos they're not exactly screaming, but by the time they get to the G, that's a dang high note. I mean, it's not Queen of the Night high, no, but it's high for a choral arrangement. It's like this weirdly dramatic high note that we don't need. So I'm not going to write in that key. Instead, I'm going to say, well, since one key was clearly too low and one's too high, I'm going to split the difference and go somewhere in the middle. So I'm going to just go ahead and pick the key of G as somewhere in the middle. All right, so now I'm going to enter my melody for Mary Had a Little Lamb. And I haven't really thought through my arrangement. All right, I just entered a bunch of notes, and I didn't say what I was doing because I'm assuming that most people watching this have an idea about entering notes. But let me just keep going, and I'm going to finish the next two bars, and I am just going to at least say what I'm doing. Notice I'm not touching my mouse for any of this. I'm doing almost everything by keyboard because it really is the most efficient way to do things usually. So I want a quarter note, 5, A, and then a half note, 6. A, and then a quarter note, B, D, half note, D. All right, so that feels like enough. When I said I want to enter the voices one at a time, I don't need to enter the whole piece. I don't even have to enter 4 measures. I could have just entered 2, but I felt like doing all 4. So what I want to do now is go on and enter the alto voice, but I'm going to do a little kind of, what would I say, a little housekeeping first here. This, I know I'm not going to want that many measures on that first system. I feel like 4 is as many as I'm going to need, right? And when you're writing songs like this that are arrangements of songs like this that have neat 4-bar phrases, it kind of makes sense to just put your line breaks there. So notice what I'm about to do. I'm still in note input mode. I've never left note input mode. Press enter, and it puts the line break there. So it's very much like a word processor. Type your notes, hit enter at the end of a line. And then you are now on the next line, ready to enter more notes. I don't want to enter more notes on the soprano. I want to enter some alto notes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to press escape to leave note input mode, come back and reselect the first measure, go to note input mode, then change to voice 2. Let's be real clear on the order of that, because I see people getting themselves in all sorts of trouble. The first thing I did was press escape to leave note input mode. Why? Because if I tried clicking a measure while still in note input mode, it's not going to select that measure. It's going to enter a note. I wasn't ready to enter a note. I just wanted to select a location. So I'm always pressing escape to leave note input mode, then selecting the measure where I'm going to start entering notes. Then I want to enter notes into voice 2, but I don't want to click the voice 2 icon right now, because see what it did? It moved the existing notes into voice 2. That's not what I wanted. So I'm going to undo that, Control Z. Instead of pressing the voice 2 button right now, I need to go to note input mode first. Go to note input mode first. While you're in note input mode, now you can change between voice 1 and voice 2, and it doesn't modify anything that's already there. It just changes what's going to happen next. Same as the duration buttons, right? If I press a half note or a whole note, it doesn't change any existing notes into half notes or whole notes. It just affects what's happening next. And since I mentioned keyboard shortcuts, the shortcut for voices is Control-Alt-Number. So Control-Alt-2 changes me to voice 2. I can see that that is the case because the cursor is now green and voice 2 is now selected on the toolbar, right? So that's how you would switch to voice 2. So now I can enter my notes for voice 2, and I'm not going to overthink this arrangement like I would if I was really doing a musical arrangement. I'm just going to think through a little tiny bit how this might work. I kind of feel like if I go something like this, quarter note, that's pretty good, right? That's probably, I'll fill in more voices later. It doesn't matter. I'm not, this isn't a composition demo. This is a MuseScore demo, right? So we're not going to stress about my note choices a whole lot here. What I want to observe here is notice that since both voices have the same rhythm, I could have entered them both into the same voice. And that is often done in hymns. If I flip back over to Garden Seasons here, I didn't do it for this one because it's not by any means necessary. But notice that the places where the rhythms are the same, I am using, I'm just making sure that I'm still broadcasting, and I am. When the chat gets quiet, I always get nervous. So in cases like this, where both voices on the staff have the same rhythm, it's dealer's choice. The editor gets to decide whether to actually show the separate voices here, stem up, stem down, or whether you want to combine them onto one staff. My advice to you, enter them separately. That's my advice. Enter them separately. And then you can combine them later. And the reason is, if you enter them into one voice and then later on you want to do some fancy passing tones like this, it's going to be harder if you started in one voice. It's a lot easier to just be consistent and then fix it later. So Christopher Bartlett is asking about, Christopher. All right, so this is a good question. Visual difference. Yes. So the difference is if the notes are in two voices. If I have two notes let me flip back over to my actual working piece here. What I entered here, let me play it now. I just left note input mode, clicked the beginning of the score. Now I'm going to press play. Whoops. Let's try that again. So they had the same rhythm, but I entered them into two voices. When they are entered into two voices, the soprano, the top voice, has a stem up. Voice 1 basically has the stem up. And right below it is voice 2 with a stem pointing down. And that will be the case no matter where on the staff these notes are. Like this G here is on, right, the second to bottom line. And normally a note on that line would have stem up. But when you're using multiple voices, the convention is voice 1 stem up, voice 2 stem down. This isn't a MuseScoreism, this is music notation. So in this case here, I've got these notes here, including this D below the staff with the stem down for the alto. So that's what's happening. You've got basically two notes. One has a stem up. The voice 1 has a stem up. Directly below it is voice 2 with a stem down. If I then select that measure, let me show you how to do the thing that I said we could do later, but I'm going to do it now so we can see it and I don't forget. I'm going to select those two measures. So I clicked one measure, shift clicked the next, and now I'm going to go to Tools, Implode. When I do that, now everything's combined into one voice. So now instead of the B at the beginning stem up and the G below it stem down, now it's a B and a G both on the same stem. And the stem is up because now the stemming rules apply. That G is the bottom half of the staff, and it wins the battle here because the B in the middle line, the stem could go either way, but the G is the furthest from the middle line and it takes stem up, so the notes are stem up. So when you're done, you can do that implode and it will combine things. And that's also the case. Let me undo that. If this F sharp, let me change that now. I'm going to select it, change it to an eighth note, and then enter an E here, enter a little passing tone. So now we have this. So I have, right, top voice stays A, bottom voice is moving. I can't do that in one voice. You need two voices for that. Well, if I select that measure and say Tools Implode, MuseScore figures that out. It combines the beats that can be combined. Beat 1 can be combined. Beat 2 cannot. So it leaves them separate. Stem up, stem down. But beat 3 and beat 4, the voices can be combined, so MuseScore does it. So implode, basically, when you select a staff and run implode, it combines the multiple voices anywhere where that is actually possible. So that is something to know. All right. So, that's the basics of entering notes using multiple voices. There's a ton more we could talk about in terms of using multiple voices, but I want to get to all the other fun stuff about choral music. So, one of them is going to be lyrics, right? Obviously. So, I talked about this, I guess, last week. I don't remember. We talked about dynamics. And the question came up, does it make sense to always put the dynamics in voice 1? And I said, yeah, probably so, for various reasons having to do with the playback, having to do with how MuseScore aligns things and so forth. Also how it exports to Music XML. I will say the same is true for lyrics. If you're going to have two voices on one staff here, but they have the same basic rhythm, so we're only going to enter one set of lyrics. And that is the case here, right? I'm not going to enter two separate sets of lyrics for voice 1 and voice 2. I'm just going to enter one set of lyrics, and it's also going to double for the bottom staff. I'm going to attach it to top staff voice 1. I'm going to select that soprano note, which is normally the melody anyhow. So I'll select that melody note, soprano note, Control L for lyrics, Command L on a Mac, and type meh, and then type a hyphen, a hyphen, and then space to move to the next note. Notice it skipped those eighth notes because they're only in voice 2. If they're, we'll come back to that later. And then had, space, a, space. So when you have separate words, you use space. Lit, and then hyphen tul, right? When you have two-syllable words, you're going to use a hyphen rather than a space to separate the syllables. And then lamb, comma, space, little, and I'm going to stop there. So those are the lyrics, right? And if I enter now some bass notes, I'm going to enter some notes into the bottom staff real quick. I'm going to let the bass. I'm going to do something I often do, and I'm going to show it to you. I'm not saying this is the right way to do it, but I often enter the bass before the tenor or even before the alto because I want to kind of understand the harmony of what I'm doing. So I'm going to enter the bass, and I'm just going to do it in voice one because it's not going to end up in voice one, but I often forget to switch to voice two. The bass is eventually going to want to be in voice two, but I often forget, and so I want to make sure you see how we deal with that. So I'll enter my bass part, and I'll say it's something like this: G down here, G, and then maybe F sharp, G. Yeah, I'm overthinking it, right? F sharp, G, G, G. This is a really boring arrangement. There you go. So I'm now entered those notes. Oh, and I forgot to make that last note a half note, so I'm going to press Shift W to lengthen a little bit, Shift W to lengthen it a little more, right? From quarter to dotted quarter to half. Shift W lengthens, Shift Q shortens. So I've entered my bass voice, but I forgot to switch to voice two. I didn't forget, but I didn't do it. So here's what I'm going to do. Oh, alto and bass are parallel octaves. You are absolutely right. And I said I wasn't going to overthink this, but yeah, I'm going to change that F sharp to a D. There we go. So thank you. I don't want those parallel octaves. So there we go. I could have also changed my alto voice to fix that. But so I've got my voice one bass part here, and I want it into voice two. So I'll select those two measures and just click the voice two button here. And that just forces everything into voice two, assuming voice two is empty. Right? If voice two already had some stuff, then it's going to see, well, where can I move it, and when, and what's going to work and what's not going to work. But for this particular case where I'm entering the bass voice first, well, I know voice two is empty because I didn't put anything there. So that is always going to work. It's always going to work to enter your bass voice on the bottom staff first in voice one, and then just send it to voice two. So there you go. Chris is asking about a scenario where the soprano and alto have different lyrics. So I am going to, it's not that they'll necessarily have different lyrics, but their melisma situation might be different. So let's hold on to that thought, and I'm going to come right back to it as soon as I now enter a tenor voice. So I'm going to enter a tenor voice, and it's going to be a D, D, C, B, and then D, 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 D. All right, let's hear this thing. Let's hear it for real. So the one downside with using Muse Sounds is it takes a moment for it to wake up when you try to play a passage. So that's kind of a little bit of a drag about it. So I already can see now I've got more parallel octaves here between my bass and tenor because same reason. So again, this is just going to be another D, and it's going to be a lame bass part. But let's hear it now. All right, simplistic but fine. So the thing that, Chris, that I was going to be saying is that the lyric for Mary, there's no melisma, right? The soprano is singing, Mary had, but the alto is singing, Mary had. There's a melisma on re. So if you wanted to show that melisma, and since I haven't done any melisma, and Mary Had a Little Lamb doesn't normally have any, the way you enter melisma is you would press underscore for as many notes as you want the melisma to go. So when I press the first underscore, it Oh, yeah, and that's not going to work because there is not a melisma in voice 1. I'm going to make a melisma in here. I'm going to make that be an A to an A flat. Mary had. I'm just going to do that just so you can see how this works. And then we'll come back to the voice 1, voice 2 business. Now that there is an eighth note here, I can press underscore while editing the re. Notice my cursor isn't even at the end of the syllable, and that's fine. I can press underscore, and it moves to the next note. No melisma line shows because I've only covered one note so far. A melisma is by definition 2 or more notes for the same syllable. So we're not going to see anything until I've pressed that underscore a second time to indicate that that syllable, Mary, covers 2 voices. I mean 2 notes, sorry, not 2 voices. So this is a situation where, in this case, in my example, the soprano didn't have a melisma, the alto did, right? There's also situations where maybe things are just offset slightly, like one voice is singing, Mary had, and the other one's, Mary had a there might be just slight differences in the rhythms between the voices that require the lyrics to be a little different, even though it's the same verse. That can happen. So I'm going to flip back over to my Garden Seasons example and point out that this happens, this sort of thing happens. You can see that there's melisma here in the top voice and the bottom voice. And that's because for demonstration purposes, I didn't want to have to, cross that bridge. I didn't want to have to explain how to have a melisma in one voice but not the other. So I just put a melisma in both voices. In point of fact, the norm is, well, I can't say what the norm is. I can say that they're both acceptable. Sometimes if one voice has a melisma and the other one doesn't, like I originally had here, it's very common to not show the melisma line for that syllable. The alto just says, okay, I know I have a melisma, no one else does. That's just the way it often is done. Some people will go out of their way to make sure that melisma line shows, and then the soprano has to look at it and say, hey, wait a minute, there's a melisma line here. I don't have a melisma. I guess that's someone else's problem. So if I really wanted that, what I could do is enter that lyric into voice 2. And then that lyric could have the melisma. But what I'm saying is you don't need to overthink that for the most part. If you're working for a publisher who demands a particular style, by all means do it. But for the most part, when doing this chorale style, where most people basically have the same rhythm other than someone maybe has a passing tone somewhere. Yes, Doug, I'm about to show that, the slur. In these cases where everyone has essentially the same rhythm except maybe one voice has an extra passing tone, we just don't sweat that passing tone in terms of showing the melisma lines. What we do, though, is what Doug is saying, we do put a slur. So slurs in vocal music mean something very specific. And so when I was first talking about what I wanted to cover in this session, I mentioned that things like articulations and dynamics have special interpretations, special meanings when it comes to vocal music, and this is one of them. Slurs for most instruments means something about playing the notes more smoothly, right? For wind instruments, it means don't tongue. For violin, it means take them on the same bow. For voice, though, I guess it sort of is similar, but it's more specific than that. It means it's one syllable connected. So in vocal music, anytime there's a melisma, you put a slur, at least for vocal choral music. You won't see that like in songbooks. You won't see that in a lot of jazz fake books and things like that, because then it just makes the thing too cluttered. But in choral music, it's kind of important to help people visualize that there is a melisma there, especially in cases like this where the lyric doesn't have the melisma line because not everyone has it. So the slurs make the difference. So you definitely should get in the habit of putting slurs on your eighth notes or wherever there's melismas, eighth notes, quarter notes, half notes, doesn't matter. So that is one special thing to know about articulations in vocal music. Slurs have that special meaning. Also, I want to talk about dynamics. If I add a dynamic, again, I'll select voice 1. Normally, for most music, dynamics go below the staff. But because the lyrics are below the staff, that's not a good idea for vocal music. So the convention for vocal music is that lyrics are going to go above the staff. So there's a couple tricks to know here. One is if you're just putting in one or two dynamics, just press X and it flips above the staff, call it done. However, if you're going to use dynamics a lot, you probably don't want to have to keep flipping them all manually like that. So what I can then do is come over to the Properties panel, and then notice the thing in the Properties panel that says Appearance, above, below. It's set to above because I just flipped it there. I'm going to click the dot, dot, dot menu and then say Save as default style for this score. By clicking that now, every dynamic I enter will appear above the staff. So if I select this note over here, and then come over to the palettes and add a different dynamic, you'll see it appears above the staff by default. So that set as default style is great if you're doing a vocal arrangement, especially if it's only voices. However, it's a little tricky because now with piano, I might want to enter some piano dynamics, and now they're on the wrong side of the staff, right? So you kind of have to hedge and think, well, if it's all instrumental music, leave the dynamics where they are. If it's all vocal music, set it to above the staff. If you've got a mix of vocal staves and instrumental staves, for now at least, you have no choice but to flip the ones that you don't need. That's the general rule of thumb there. If you've got all voices, do the set as style to put them above. If you've got a mixture, you're going to have to flip some things around. So Christopher's asking, what if you have different dynamics for different voices? So there is when you totally can use, then I can put a MP and then flip it below. So I have the MF above the staff in voice 1, the MP below the staff in voice 2. However, at this point, we are now stretching the bounds of when it's worth putting these in closed score format. As soon as you start getting beyond these really simple, both voices have essentially the same rhythm and the same lyrics and the same dynamics, as soon as you start getting in situations where it's anything more complicated than that, where the rhythms are substantially different, the lyrics are substantially different, or the dynamics are substantially different, you don't use closed score format. In that case, you're going to want to switch to open score format, like I do in PA-Yesu here, where each part is a separate voice. And then you can have your dynamics where they need to be. I actually didn't enter any dynamic markings in this, in part because, in large part actually because dynamic markings were not typically written in as often in Renaissance music as currently, and I didn't want it to the score to get too cluttered with dynamics that really don't seem to fit the style. But in any case, that is the deal, that when as soon as your parts differ enough that you have to start asking questions about how do I do this if the parts are different in voice 1 and voice 2, that's the time to start thinking about switching to open format. But yes, it totally works to have your dynamics above and below. And if I flip back over to Garden Seasons, we'll see that in the contrapuntal section here, when I play this section here, let's play it. Right? Everyone has different rhythms and different lyrics at the same time. If we were hearing lyrics, which of course we're not, but everyone has different rhythms, and so therefore, notice what I'm doing here. I've put so it starts off with the alto singing and the lyrics are below, but when the soprano comes in here, The soprano's lyric is above the staff. It happens to be the same as the alto's lyric there, but for the most part, because of the counterpoint, the lyrics are not the same between summer, fall, and while the alto is singing fall, tenor comes in with summer, fall. I'm singing the wrong notes, but okay. While the alto is singing fall, the tenor starts singing summer. So the tenor lyrics are above the staff, and that happens the same way. If you need lyrics separately for the voices in closed score, I'm still going to select voice 1, Control L, and put in my lyric, hey, or ooh. Let's say it's ooh. And then I can press X to flip it above. Then, now that it's above, as I double click it to edit it and press space, notice it stays above. Ooh, 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 and then I'll use a melisma. Ooh, 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 ah, because I don't know. So putting the lyric for the tenor above the staff if it's different than everyone else's lyric. And again, as soon as you start getting into too much of that, don't try to do it in closed score format. But if it's just a brief passage, you can totally do it. And that's what my Garden Seasons demo was meant to show. That since most of the piece is chorale style with everyone having the same basic rhythm, I went with closed score format, but that one contrapuntal section only lasts like 7 bars, 6 bars. Because I wanted to show how to do it, I show it. Okay, Christopher is now asking about checking that your lyrics are aligning with the notes. That's a good question. I don't have a good answer for you. Does your screen reader read when it's reading the lyric? Does it say what beat it's on? Because that's the only thing I could think of is as it's reading the lyric, hopefully it tells you what beat it's on. But no, as you're navigating the notes, it'll tell you the syllable that's attached to that note, right? So you just have to pay attention that each syllable gets read along with its note. Now, if you mean the visual alignment of the lyric itself and which side of the staff it's on, no, I don't know a way to do that, to check that other than visually. You could keep going to the properties panel and check above, below, check offsets, and construct a mental map of what's going on, but I can't even imagine trying to pull that off personally. I would think that the visual alignment just has to be gauged visually. So, there were a couple other things that I wanted to talk about here, and so I'm going to show them as well. Notice that in this case here, summer, fall, sorry about that, summer, those are 2 melismas. Well, as long as you have those 8th notes being melismas, it's okay to beam them the way I have. However, traditionally, 8th notes that don't represent melismas don't get beamed. So if I wanted to enter, say, a faster version of this rhythm, I'm just going to enter A, D, little lamb, and say that one voice is going to want to sing little lamb instead of little lamb. If I wanted to do that and enter my lyrics, little lamb, because little is not a melisma, it's 2 separate syllables, traditionally we won't beam those 2 8th notes. When I say traditionally, I mean that's how it was done through most published music through the, say, 19th century or so. At some point, people started getting away from that convention as rhythms started getting more complex, and it was the beams are supposed to be able to help you read the rhythm, and the more complex, the more eighth notes you have to deal with, the more beams can really help you parse those. So when you get into these like patter songs, Gilbert and Sullivan, where there's a lot of eighth notes and 16th notes, doing those all without beams makes it really, really hard to parse those rhythms. And so beaming starts to use more of the regular convention. So MuseScore by default isn't going to use vocal beaming. If you just have a few notes that you want to break, I'm going to show you how to break the beam. You're going to select the note for tul, little, and say, hey, I don't want a beam going into it. And then I'm going to come over to the properties panel and then click where it says beam. And we're going to click the icon that says break beam left. That means break the beam to the left of this note. And that will break the beam going into tul, and now we have little as two separate eighth notes with flags instead of beams. If you've got a whole score to do like this, it's going to be a pain in the butt to do that over and over again for each eighth note if there's a lot of eighth notes. So instead, there is a plugin for it. And I don't remember if I have it installed, but let's find out. I'm going to select this measure. I'm going to come to my plugins menu and composing, arranging tools. Nope, it's not there. Let me try clicking manage plugins. Is traditional vocal beaming? Yeah, here's traditional vocal beaming. You have to download that plugin from musescore.org. But once you do, you can enable it. So you click it in the plugins menu, and then you will say enable it. And now, when you go back to your score, you will find it in the plugins menu there, traditional vocal beaming, and click this thing, and boom, it automatically breaks all the beams. It actually pays attention to your lyrics. It doesn't just break all eighth note beams. It looks at the lyrics to figure out where the melismas are and breaks eighth note beams when there's not melisma. It's pretty good from what I'm sure it's possible to fool it, especially with multiple voices, but for the most part, that traditional vocal beaming plugin rocks and does the right thing here. All right, good, Christopher. Yeah, I was pretty sure that the syllables spoke while you're navigating the notes, because normally, like, you're probably navigating fast enough you don't listen to it, read everything, because you just want to get on to the next thing, because alt-right is going to take you to the lyric anyhow. But if you sit there and be patient, then you'll hear it read the lyric. So, there you go. That's another thing to know about. That traditional vocal beaming. I'm just about wrapping up here, and so if there's any other questions of things that people definitely want me to cover, let me know. I want to see, because I know I had, there's the poll. Where I want multiple voices, notation of rhythms, dynamics, articulations. There you go. Yeah, so I covered the things I said I was going to cover. I mentioned that thing about showing ranges. Well, the way that's going to work is select a clef at the beginning of the staff, and then come over to palettes. No, I'm sorry. What am I doing? Select the clef. Yes, in the palettes, you're going to go to the lines palette. The lines palette. I think it might also be in the pitch palette. Let me find out. It really should be if it isn't. Yes, there it is. So select the clef and then click this ambitus thing. That's that symbol there. Click it and you'll see that it fills in the appropriate range automatically, which is kind of cool. So, and it will also if I then take this B up a lot higher, it doesn't update the ambitus instantly, but if I then select the ambitus and come over to the properties panel and click update to match the notes, now it updates that ambitus. So that is a quick way to add that marking, and marking is pretty commonly used in vocal music. You wouldn't use it in a closed score format like this because now it's not clear, hey, does this apply to soprano or alto or both? You mostly use that when every part has its own staff. Allison's asking, am I going to look at the pieces people submitted? Absolutely. So that is the point. Music Masterclass will be looking at pieces that people submitted. And I've got a whole lot of pieces submitted, so I'm sure I can't get to everyone's piece in detail. But my goal will be to go through and look at little bits of different people's pieces. And if you have particular questions about your own piece, just be ready to ask them in the chat tomorrow, because tomorrow, Music Masterclass, that's what we're going to be doing, is talking about the projects that people have been working on musically, how you actually are doing with your SATB arrangements. All right. I covered a lot of ground here. Some of it was really basic stuff about node input. Some of it was a little more complex about rearranging where things are layout wise and working with multiple voices. And there was that whole bit about muse sounds. But in any case, lots of stuff covered, and I'm ready to get on with things. And so now, as you listen to the MuseScore theme music, just appreciate the fact that we are now hearing it with muse sounds. Whoa! Except we're also hearing my system going haywire. Too many scores open at once. Actually, I want to try something right here. Give me a moment. I want to try something. Nope, just too many scores open. All right, so much for that. But in any case, hope you all had a good time here, learned something, and we'll be back tomorrow talking about music. And now it's playing better, right? So next week will be the score of the month, and we're going to look at a choral score. I'll go ahead and take a choral score and kind of enter it, and we'll get to see a lot of the same things. So between this week and next week should be a good I don't know, introduction to or exploration of the subject of entering choral music. And since that's been kind of the theme of the month, and we'll be doing more choral music in the Counterpoint course, thought it was going to be good to cover. So hope you all have a good rest of your day, and see you next time. Bye.